Life often surprises us in ways we least expect. Sometimes those surprises come in the form of joy, sometimes in heartbreak, and sometimes in mysteries wrapped in grief and hope. For Emma Collins, a 43-year-old woman living in a modest apartment in Ohio, life had been fairly ordinary. She worked as a librarian, lived quietly with her cat Milo, and often told herself that she had long passed the age when big life changes would come her way. Then, one ordinary Thursday morning, everything shifted. A thick envelope arrived at her mailbox, stamped with the insignia of a law firm in Boston. At first, Emma assumed it was junk mail. But when she opened it, her hands trembled. It was a letter notifying her that she had inherited a house on the outskirts of Boston. The previous owner, a man named Henry Whitaker, had named her as his sole beneficiary. The strangest part? Emma had never heard that name in her life. The letter was straightforward, legal in tone, yet at the bottom, scrawled in uneven handwriting, there was a short message. "Come here, my child. You'll understand." That phrase unsettled Emma more than anything. My child? Who was Henry Whitaker? And why would he call her that? Was it some cruel mistake? A scam? Or was there a truth buried somewhere in the shadows of her family's past? Emma had always believed she knew her family's story. Her mother, Margaret, raised her alone after her father died when she was a baby. There were no strangers, no secrets at least, none that Emma was aware of. But fate had left her a key, a house, a name, and a question that would unravel everything she thought she knew. Curiosity gnawed at Emma's heart. Oh, skeptical. She contacted the law firm to confirm the inheritance. Everything was legitimate: deeds, signatures, and the last will of Henry Whitaker. Against her cautious nature, Emma packed a small bag, boarded a bus to Boston, and followed the directions to the property. When she arrived, she found herself standing before a weather-worn wooden house tucked near the edge of a forest. White. Paint peeled from its siding, ivy crept across the porch. The windows looked like tired eyes staring into the past. The lawyer handed her the keys and left. Alone, Emma turned the key in the lock and pushed open the heavy oak door. The air smelled of cedar, dust, and something faintly sweet, like lavender long faded. It was as if time had stopped inside. She wandered through the rooms. The furniture was old but well kept. On the walls hung black and white photographs of people she didn't recognize, except one picture on the mantel that caught her breath. It showed a young man with kind eyes standing beside a woman who looked strikingly like her mother in her youth. Her heart raced. She tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but the resemblance was too sharp. Upstairs, she found a small library lined with shelves of books. In the corner sat a locked wooden box carved with initials, H.W., intrigued. Emma brought it downstairs and tried the keys she'd been given, but none fit. Frustrated yet determined, she hired a locksmith the next morning. When the box finally opened with a soft click, Emma leaned over it, and her world shifted. Inside lay dozens of letters, carefully tied in bundles with ribbon. The pages were yellowed, edges curled. She untied the first bundle, and her hands shook as she read. They were love letters written by Henry to a woman named Margaret Collins. Emma froze. Her mother's name was Margaret Collins. The letters spoke of secret meetings, long walks under autumn leaves, dreams of a shared future. The handwriting flowed with tenderness, longing, and despair. Emma felt like an intruder, peering into an intimacy that had never been meant for her eyes. Emma sat at the old wooden desk in Henry's library, her hands trembling as she spread the fragile letters across its surface. The paper smelled faintly of ink and time, the handwriting looping with care. She read them one after another, her pulse quickening with every line. Henry's words painted a vivid picture of a love story she had never been told. "My dearest Margaret," one letter began, "I dream every night of a life where it is only you and me, free from the rules others impose. I see you in every autumn leaf, hear your laughter in every songbird. Though the world keeps us apart, my heart belongs to you alone. Emma swallowed hard. Margaret, her mother, it was impossible to deny. These weren't letters written to just any woman named Margaret Collins. They carried details, her favorite flowers, her dream of teaching piano, the scar on her wrist from falling off her bicycle. As a girl, details Emma knew because her mother had once shared them casually at the kitchen table. The revelation left her dizzy. All her life, Emma believed her father had died when she was an infant. Her mother had rarely spoken about him, saying only that he was kind, that he loved them both, and that fate had been cruel to take him so soon. Now here, in her trembling hands, was evidence of an entirely different story. She reached for another letter dated shortly before Emma's birth. Margaret, my heart aches, knowing that you carry our child and I cannot be there beside you. I wanted to build a life with you, to raise her together. But I know the pressure you face, the disapproval, the voices of others who say our love cannot last. Still, promise me this if you ever tell her about me. Tell her that I loved her before she even drew her first breath. Emma pressed the paper to her lips, tears streaming down her face. Our child. The words echoed in her mind. Her hands shook. As she whispered to the empty room, "Oh my God, he's talking about me." At the bottom of the box lay a photograph. She lifted it carefully. It showed a man, Henry, with warm eyes and a strong, gentle smile. In his arms was a tiny baby swaddled in a blanket. On the back, written in neat handwriting, were the words, Emma. 1980. Her chest tightened so hard she could hardly breathe. Henry hadn't been a stranger at all. He had held her, if only once. He had known her name. The next bundle of letters revealed even more. Henry had written on every birthday, "Happy 5th birthday, my sweet girl. I imagine you laughing as you open your presents. I hope your mother baked you a cake." Another read, "I heard you sang at the school recital. I wasn't there, but a friend told me you shone brighter than the stage lights." Emma's breath caught. He had been there somewhere in the shadows, watching, caring, but never close enough to reveal himself. She remembered those recitals, looking out into the crowd, never realizing that maybe, just maybe, her real father had been sitting quietly at the back. Why hadn't her mother told her? Why had she woven a story about a dead husband instead of the truth? Anger and grief twisted inside her. She felt robbed of years she could have spent knowing Henry, of conversations never spoken, of memories that might have been hers. But alongside the anger, there was sorrow. Sorrow for a man who had loved so deeply, yet lived in silence. Sorrow for her mother, who must have carried the weight of that secret every single day. Emma sat for hours, lost in thought. The letters spread before her like pieces of a puzzle. The more she read, the more questions burned inside her. Did her mother ever respond? Did she love Henry until the end, or had she buried those feelings too? And why had she chosen never to tell Emma the truth? By dawn, Emma knew she couldn't rest until she found answers. The only person alive who might know the full story was her mother's sister, Aunt Mary. Clutching the letters to her chest, Emma whispered into the silence of Henry's house, "I need to know who you really were and why she never told me." And with that, she knew her journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. But then she read one line that made her heart stop. "If you ever read this, Margaret, please tell our daughter that her father always loved her, even if he could never hold her in his arms." The words blurred as tears filled Emma's eyes. Daughter, father. Was Henry Whitaker not a stranger at all but her real father? Emma couldn't shake the weight of what she had uncovered. The letters, the photograph, the tender words of a man she had never known yet somehow always belonged to everything she thought. She understood about her family was collapsing. For days, she carried Henry's box of letters back with her to Ohio. She barely slept. Each night she sat at her kitchen table, reading through them again, tracing the ink with her fingertips, as though touching the words might somehow let her feel the presence of the father. She'd lost before she even knew him, but the questions only multiplied. Why had her mother never spoken of Henry? What had really happened between them? Emma realized there was only one person left alive who might have the answers: her mother's younger sister, Aunt Mary. Emma hadn't seen Aunt Mary in months. The woman lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town, a place filled with plants, porcelain teacups, and the faint scent of cinnamon. When Emma called and asked to visit, Mary's voice had been warm but cautious, as though she already suspected what was coming. When Emma arrived, Mary greeted her with a long hug. "You look tired, dear," she said, leading her inside. "Sit down. I'll make us some tea." Emma waited until the steaming cups were set on the table before she pulled out Henry's letters. She laid them carefully in front of her aunt. "Aunt Mary," she began, her voice unsteady, "I found these in a house in Boston." They were written by Henry Whitaker. Mary froze. Her hands trembled as she lifted the first letter, her eyes scanning the handwriting. For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, she looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "So he left them to you?" Emma's chest tightened. "You knew?" Mary nodded slowly, her face etched with both sorrow and relief. "Yes, child, I knew. Henry was your father." The words hung heavy in the air. Though Emma had already guessed, hearing them spoken aloud was like a thunderclap. Her throat constricted. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't my mother tell me?" Sighed deeply and reached across the table, taking Emma's hand. "It wasn't because she didn't love you. It was because she did." And then the story unfolded. Mary told her how Margaret and Henry had met when they were young. Margaret, full of dreams, and Henry, kind and gentle, but from a poorer background. Their love was genuine, fierce, and undeniable. But Margaret's parents disapproved. They believed Henry couldn't provide the stability their daughter deserved. When Margaret became pregnant, panic set in. The family feared scandal, humiliation. They forced her into marriage with another man, Mary said softly, a man they believed could save face for the family. He agreed to raise you as his own, though his heart was never truly in it. Emma's stomach turned. The man she had grown up believing was her father, a man she barely remembered before his death, hadn't been her father at all. "And Henry?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mary's eyes glistened, heartbroken, but he never gave up. "On you, he sent money, quietly. He asked about you through friends, though he was never allowed to be close. He went to some of your school plays, standing at the back where you wouldn't notice. He kept photographs of you, Emma. Every scrap of your life he could find, he treasured." Emma's tears spilled over. She remembered her childhood recitals, the sense that sometimes a stranger's gaze lingered on her. Could that have been him, watching silently, aching to be near? Mary's voice broke. Your mother loved Henry until the day she died. But she thought silence was her only choice. She wanted to give you a stable life, free from the whispers of gossip and judgment. And Henry, he respected her decision, though it cost him everything. Emma sat in stunned silence. The anger she had carried toward her mother began to soften, replaced by a deeper, more complex grief. Her mother hadn't lied out of cruelty. She had sacrificed. She had carried a secret her whole life, a secret that must have broken her heart every time she looked at her daughter. But still, Emma couldn't help the ache. "She should have told me," she whispered. "I should have known him while he was alive, Mary." Squeezed her hand, perhaps. But sometimes love chooses silence. She believed she was protecting you. And Henry, he never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, you would learn the truth. Emma looked down at the letters spread across the table. There. Ink smudged now with her tears. For the first time, she didn't feel only loss, she felt connection. She felt the presence of a man who had loved her all along, from the edges of her life. That night, as Emma drove home, the moon hung low in the sky, glowing like a lantern in the dark. She carried the letters beside her on the passenger seat. No longer just scraps of paper, but bridges to a man she wished she had known. The truth was painful. It was heavy. But it was also a gift. Henry had loved her, and now, finally, she knew. When Emma returned to Boston, the old house no longer felt like a stranger's property. Felt alive with meaning, with echoes of love and regret that pulsed through its walls. She carried the truth from Aunt Mary in her heart, heavy but clarifying. And she knew she needed to see Henry's world again this time, not as a stranger, but as a daughter. She pushed open the front door. The wooden floor creaked beneath her. Shoes, but the sound seemed gentler now, like the sigh of someone relieved to welcome her back. Dust motes floated in the sunlight streaming through the windows, and the smell of aged wood mixed with something faintly floral. She realized it. Was lavender her mother's favorite scent? Had Henry planted it outside for her? Emma moved from room to room, slowly, deliberately, letting her fingertips brush over the furniture, the faded curtains, the framed photographs. She paused at the mantel where that picture of Henry and her young mother still stood. She touched the frame and whispered, "I know now." Her steps carried her up the narrow staircase, past wallpaper faded with decades of sunlight, to the attic door. She pushed it open and climbed the steps into a room filled with boxes, trunks, and the smell of cedar. She pulled open the first trunk and gasped. Inside were scrapbooks, page after page of carefully collected mementos of her life. There was her kindergarten class photo, cut neatly from a yearbook. Her high school graduation program, pressed between the pages. A newspaper clipping about the local choir concert where Emma had once sung a solo. Even the flyer from a charity bake sale where she had baked cookies with her classmates. Emma sank to her knees, her hands shaking as she turned the pages. "He was there," she whispered. "He saw me." He cared. In the corner of the attic stood a stack of journals, their spines worn but intact. She picked one at random and opened it. Henry's handwriting filled the pages, thoughts about life, reflections on the books he read, but also entry after entry about Emma. Emma is 12 today. I wonder if she likes the gift her mother gave her. I wish I could have been the one too. Place it in her hands. She is 15 now. Oh, and I heard from a friend that she plays piano beautifully, just like her mother once did. I'm proud of her, though she doesn't know me. Emma pressed her palm against the ink, her tears dripping onto the page. The words blurred, but the love behind them was undeniable. Toward the back of one journal, dated only a year before his death, Henry had written, "The greatest regret of my life is never hearing her call me father. I have lived in shadows, content to watch her grow from afar. But if she ever finds this house, if she ever reads these words, I hope she will know I never stopped loving her. Not for a single day." Emma broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. She hugged the journal to her chest, rocking gently as if the act could bridge the years they had lost. The anger she had felt toward her mother softened even further. She began to understand. Silence had been her mother's prison, her way of shielding Emma from judgment. And Henry, though absent in presence, had been present in spirit every moment of her life. She sat in that attic until the sun dipped low and shadows lengthened across the floorboards. Finally, she rose and walked downstairs. The house no longer felt like a relic of strangers, felt like a place where love had lived, where sacrifice had been made, and where she, Emma Collins, finally belonged. That night, she curled up in the old armchair in the library, Henry's journal on her lap. She whispered into the quiet room, "I'm here now, Dad." I know for the first time in years, Emma felt something inside her settle, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. She had lost a father, yes, but she had also found him. And in that house filled with memories, she wasn't alone anymore. Weeks passed, but Emma couldn't bring herself to leave Boston. Today she returned to the house, covering small fragments of Henry's life. The gardening tools neatly hung in the shed, the half-finished painting on an easel in the sunroom, the piano in the parlor that hadn't been played in years. Every corner carried his fingerprints, and now that she knew the truth, she longed to stay close to it. Friends back in Ohio called to ask when she was coming home. She gave vague answers. The thought of returning to her old apartment, her quiet, librarian life, felt hollow now. She wasn't the same person anymore. The house had changed her. One morning, as she sipped coffee on the creaking porch steps, Emma realized she didn't want to let go of this place. Selling it would feel like erasing Henry a second time. Like keeping Etra storing, it felt like honoring him. The decision came suddenly, yet with clarity. She would stay. She would make this house her own. Over the next months, Emma poured herself into restoration. She hired carpenters to repair the porch and painters to freshen the peeling white siding. She tended the overgrown garden with her own hands, planting lavender by the windowsills just as Henry once had. Slowly, the house transformed, not into something new, but into something alive again as she worked. She found herself speaking aloud, as though Henry could hear her. "What do you think, Dad? Should I plant roses along the path? Or the kitchen needs new curtains? Don't you agree?" At first it felt strange, but over time it became natural. She no longer felt like she was talking to empty air. She felt connected. When the house was finally complete, Emma gave it a name. Whitaker's Rest. She envisioned it as a retreat, a small Badan breakfast for travelers, artists and writers. A place where people could come, rest, and feel at peace. She wanted others to experience the sense of belonging she had found there. The first guest arrived in spring. As Emma welcomed them inside, she felt a quiet pride. She showed them the library, now carefully arranged with Henry's books and journals. The letters were stored in a glass case, displayed not as relics of sorrow, but as testaments to love. Visitors often asked about the story behind the house, and Emma would share it not with bitterness, but with reverence. She told them about Henry, a man who loved silently from the shadows, and Margaret, a woman who sacrificed everything for her child. And she told them about the daughter who had once felt lost but had finally found her place. One evening, after the guests had gone to bed, Emma stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and violet. She held one of Henry's journals in her hands, the one with his final entry. She whispered into the twilight, "Good night, Dad. Thank you for giving me this home. Thank you for loving me, even when I didn't know." A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of lavender across the porch. Emma closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel incomplete. She felt whole. Months turned into a year. And Whitaker's Rest had become more than a restored house, had become a sanctuary. Not just for Emma, but for the many souls who found comfort beneath its roof. Travelers left notes in the guest book describing how peaceful they felt. How the house seemed to carry a warmth that words couldn't capture. Emma often thought about what inheritance truly meant. Most people imagined wealth, jewels, or estates. But what Henry had given her was something different. It wasn't just a house, it was belonging. It was a piece of history, love silently guarded through decades, and a truth that reshaped her very sense of self. Sometimes she would sit in the garden, the evening sun dipping low, and think about her mother. She wished she could have known Margaret's struggles more fully, understood the weight of her sacrifice, yet there was no bitterness in her heart anymore. Margaret had chosen survival for her daughter, even if it meant erasing Henry from their lives. And Henry, in turn, had chosen love, even if it meant never being acknowledged. Two broken halves of a story had finally come together in Emma. She had grown up believing she was ordinary, unnoticed, and unanchored. Now, she knew she had been deeply loved, even if from a distance, even if imperfectly. That knowledge filled a void she hadn't realized had defined her for so long. One spring afternoon, while tending to the lavender beds, Emma overheard a guest telling another, "There's something special about this place. You can feel it in the walls, like it carries someone's heart." Emma smiled quietly to herself. Yes, she thought. It does. In the evenings, she continued to read Henry's journals. Some pages were about daily routines, others about long forgotten details of Boston life, and many about Emma herself. The way she laughed, the way she held her books too close to her chest, the way she once hid behind her hair in school photographs. He had noticed everything. One night, closing the journal after another entry filled with Henry's tender observations, Emma whispered aloud, "I see you now. Dad and I carry you with me." The wind outside rustled the trees, as if in response. The inheritance had not been about property or possessions. It had been about connection, about bridging a gap between past and present, about healing wounds that had remained invisible for too long. Emma knew that one day, her own story would be told, not as the woman who unexpectedly inherited a house, but as the woman who transformed grief and mystery into a legacy of love. Whitaker's Rest would outlive her, standing as a testament not to secrets kept, but to truths revealed and cherished on the anniversary of the day she first stepped into the creaking old house. Emma sat on the porch with a candle lit beside her. She raised a glass of wine to the night sky. "To Henry," she said softly. "To Margaret. To the family I never knew, but who always knew me." Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude. The candle flickered, casting a gentle glow across the porch. Emma leaned back, her heart finally at peace. The inheritance had been unexpected. But perhaps, she thought, it had arrived at exactly the moment she needed it most. And with that, Emma knew she was no longer lost. She was home. Life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes the greatest gifts we receive are not measured in money or possessions, but in the hidden connections that finally come to light when we least expect them. Emma thought she was inheriting nothing more than an old house from a stranger. Instead, she inherited a story, a truth, and a love that had been waiting for her all along. And maybe that's what makes this story so powerful. It reminds us that behind every locked door, every sealed envelope, every untold memory, there could be something that changes the way we see ourselves forever. Think about it for a moment. What if your family held a secret? One that might completely reshape the way you understand your past? Would you want to know? And if you discovered it, would it break you, or would it give you the strength to keep moving forward? Emma's journey teaches us that sometimes the answers we've been looking for come not in the form of explanations, but in the form of belonging. She didn't just inherit a house. She inherited a place in someone's heart. She inherited proof that she had always been seen, always been loved. Now we'd love to hear from you. Has there ever been a time when you uncovered something about your family, big or small, that changed the way you thought about your life? Hey, maybe it was a letter, a photograph, or a story told years later. How did it make you feel? Share your experiences in the comments below. You never know, your story might inspire someone else who is carrying their own questions. Waiting for answers.n. If Emma's journey touched you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone you care about. Because sometimes the most unexpected inheritance we can give each other is hope. After all, every family has secrets. But within those secrets, there is always love waiting to be found.